Welcome to the Financial Freedom Secrets Show. This is your host, Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, helping business owners create financial freedom faster by mastering the language of money. Want to see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom? Complete our 40-point financial performance scorecard at wealthhealthcheck.com.au. That's wealthhealthcheck.com.au. The average score for most business owners is 18 out of 40. So complete the scorecard now and see how well you're tracking towards financial freedom. G'day guys, it's Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor. We're here for another episode of Financial Freedom Secrets. And I've got a good friend of mine who's coming all the way from the other side of the world. This is one of my first meetings of the day. This is his last before he takes his lovely partner out on Valentine's Day. I love to know that you put me first, mate, which is fantastic. But I've got Ross O'Loughlin who's coming. Where are you dialing in from today, mate?
Yeah, so I'm based just outside of Montreal, Canada. So it's currently freezing. I believe it's minus 15 outside, originally from Ireland. So I'm not used to this freezing cold temperatures, but Canada is where we call home these days.
Mate, I love Canada. It's very picturesque, but it's very extreme in terms of the weather, particularly compared to where we live in the world. So, mate, I'm really excited to be talking today. I think we share a lot in common in regards to our ethos and our philosophies, but in very, very different worlds. And I really wanted to get you on the show to showcase your genius and your perspective on the world and how you support your clients to achieve some pretty phenomenal outcomes. So, Ross, in a nutshell, tell us a little bit about you and your story and what got you to where you are.
Yeah, so the short version of the hero's journey is whatever you want to call it is a former engineer, two-time recovering engineer that found my way into a software company and discovered marketing and realized, oh, this is absolutely what I should be doing instead. Always had a passion for writing and whatnot. And that kind of combination of engineering and writing is very rare, I would say, in the engineering world. And as soon as the company discovered I had that, they were like, "Do you want to work with us on some of the marketing here?" And as soon as I discovered marketing, it was like the whole trifecta of what I was actually interested in. Like, I have a technical brain. I'm good with numbers. Like, I got through like a master's in engineering, but like, just being in spreadsheets all day and just technical conversations with engineering people all day just bored the hell out of me. But like, marketing has that kind of technical numbers side, but then you add in a sprinkle of creativity and psychology and understanding people. And now we're like really cooking with what I actually enjoy doing. So went down that rabbit hole for a few years, worked as a copywriter, as a marketing manager, then got into some big education, like online education companies. And when you're coming up as kind of a young freelancer, like the launch model is, have you done $1 million launch is what everyone is kind of asking and what you want to kind of get under your belt, and managed to do a couple of them and then realized this fucking sucks, right? Like it was like bubble bursting moments because it was kind of what I had been working towards and like what I'd left a career behind for. And then I got there and I was like, bro, this lifestyle kills me. Like, it's just hustle and grind. And like, it's also very dark in a sense because you could put all that effort and energy in, and if it pays off, like, you pat yourself on the back and it's like that reinforcement of it was worth it. But when it doesn't work out, like it is just torture. You know what I mean? Like, you've slaved for months and then you don't get the payoff. Existential crisis in the business, letting people go, like all sorts of like nastiness. If the company has put itself in a situation where it's over relying on that strategy and expecting a big payout that doesn't come through, like, it's a very risky situation. And after I saw that, I was just like, bro, this is daft. Like, from a systems perspective, like, a couple of companies were expecting this big payout, and they had no regular, just like pipeline of like new consistent business coming in. And I was like, what? Like, why would you do this? Would you not want some level of just consistent, regular, like a pipe into your business? Like, I was civil engineering and water treatment. I was like, bro, we need just like a pipe of like water flowing into our coffers here. And it wasn't happening. So that was kind of like the call to action for me to like figure that out, and went down the rabbit hole for a few years and emerged. And now we have a whole system that we have clients kind of implement to kind of sell online education and coaching programs without having to rely just on that just exhausting kind of tyrannical launch model, let's call it, right? Because it tends to rule people's lives when they're in that cycle. Not that I'm totally against launches, but like when you're stuck in that cycle and if all you have is like a hammer, like everything looks like a nail. You know what I mean? And that's what we kind of help people move away from.
We've been there, mate. And what's interesting is that for most people, their first foray into the kind of online education, informational world is through launches. And we did it.
Yeah.
And it is the most stressful, anxiety-inducing thing. Because you're right, when it works, you feel like an absolute hero. And then when you've invested all of this effort and time and basically there's a huge opportunity cost associated and it doesn't work, it is just soul-crushing. So, mate, why do you feel this industry is so used to and reliant on this launch model? Like, what's the appeal when there are so many downsides?
Yeah, I think there's a number. It's a really good question, actually. So there's a number of things. Like one, like urgency and scarcity just works. You know what I mean? And like coaches teach people what works. Because if you come to me and we're like, want to get a result, like I'm going to show you what works and what gets you a result so that we can like keep going. Now, what I've discovered as well, and what my ongoing theory of it is the space has shifted in the last 5 years. Like it's gone away just from courses. You know what I mean? Like you're seeing hybrid courses emerging, like high-end coaching has become more of a thing because a lot of people kind of discovered like the old do-it-yourself courses don't really get the job done. But the launch model doesn't really care. Do you know what I mean? It's like sell people in, like they're not going to use the course anyway, just sell them the information. But like what I have found is like if you're selling with that urgency and scarcity, you're kind of moving people to a decision and they're not making the decision at the time that's right for them. And then they just end up drifting. Like I've used a number of those strategies with some clients and like the attrition and the engagement of those clients is just, it falls off a cliff very, very quickly, right? So I think there's also like people don't have like a system or the ability or the mindset for like, how do you actually sell someone and get them started without this massive, like you need to make a decision now, or like you're not going to join. I'm not going to let you in. They tell me I have been trained to think in launches. I don't actually know how to do this otherwise. Right? Like people just haven't been given like the part B. And what they have been given is like evergreen funnels. That's like the alternative that people kind of get sold. But then people go and they try to build an evergreen funnel and like, I don't know if you've ever tried to build the funnels that people teach you, but like trying to convert brand new leads from scratch is like hard, right? Like it's like particularly if you're selling something expensive. Yes. You can get some sales out of it, but and not to say that people don't have effective funnels, but like the amount of people that come to me that have failed with those, and then they're like, well, that didn't work, so now I have to go back. I have to go back to the old reliable that has worked, right? Just like the junkie looking to get their hit. And like that's really the cycle I see a lot of people in. They'll try something to get some level of consistency. It doesn't work, and then they're like, okay, well, I'm running out of money. I got to top up the old wood stock out the back there. The resources are getting low, so let's just do another launch until we figure something out. That's my estimation of it, at least.
Yeah, it's really interesting, mate. I think it's a catch-22, isn't it? Because it's like there's an ethical dilemma here between what gets the best results, and I think it's pretty safe to say that the launch model isn't conducive to results at the client level, but it can be really conducive to results at a business level. And on the flip side, having a basically always open approach doesn't necessarily create the kind of the scarcity mentality, but it allows people to choose the right place for a time. And it was the feedback was actually one of the straws that broke the camel's back for us to shift out of launches. Was that we'd speak to people and they're like, hey, not right now. I can start in a few weeks. I'm like, no, too late. We're not starting the next one until next quarter. And it was just so frustrating. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, like this stuff's so valuable, but it's so hard to have a static start and stop that's going to work for everyone. It just doesn't make sense. It's unrealistic. So, mate, let's talk about some of the alternatives here, Ross. How do you get people away from the dark side and moving towards the light as such?
Yeah, it's really, really good question. I mean, what's interesting is like, just as you illustrated, right? Like that's one scenario that a lot of my clients end up in, which is launch has ended, the cart open period has closed, and then prospect, referral, hot lead pops up in the inbox, and they're like, hey, like, what's the story? I've heard of you. Can like talk to me about getting some help. The first thing I think people need to do is you need to move away from the launch mindset of how you sell with the launch, right? Because like there's a couple of models that people teach with launches, which is get them to the webinar, sell them on the webinar, and then like the sales happens on the webinar. Or get them to the sales page, send them to the sales page, and like the sales page is what's going to sell them, right? In my experience, like both of those, yes, they're very effective, but when you use them in a sequence, right? Like you got to lead people up and then like you're sending them to the page and they're finding all the information on the page, but the sales page isn't really doing the selling, right? And like what I see a lot of people do is, or at least before they come to start working with us, is like they'll hear those prospects and they'll say, oh yeah, you can check out my product here. And then they like link to the sales page as if they're sending this person to this sales page with no context and no time frame to make a decision is somehow going to get them like, lathered up and ready to buy. Like that very rarely happens. And again, one of the reasons why people conclude people don't buy outside of launches. So first thing that I get my clients to do, and I think a lot of people I would recommend doing is like, how do you have the sales conversation with someone? Now you can have this on the phone, you can have it in the chat, you can have it in an email dialogue, that's fine. But how do you get someone into a conversation that they're interested in what you've got to do? Like, and how do you create desire, stretch the gap, as we would say, and how do you do that in like a time effective way for you? Right? Because like if you're selling something expensive, it's worth doing it on the phone. If you're not selling something expensive, you got to find another way to do this, right? I know like we've got a common contact in Taki Moore. He's sell by chat approach. There's Dean Jackson. He's got conversational conversion. But there's a lot of different ways you can do it. It's all the same, right? Get into the dialogue with someone. And when you're in the dialogue with someone, you're selling them in the dialogue, right? It's not, I'm sending you to some page, right, where you can like auto checkout or you're mass selling in a one-to-one environment. Like that really is the first thing a lot of people I think need to master. Because then you can, if you have that ability, then it's about just finding the other conversations that are around you in your business that you can start pushing into that mechanism or directing into that mechanism. So like the first thing definitely is understand that you are like going to like conversion and selling is an active process and your business needs to be able to do that in some shape or form, right? You sell largely on the phone, Jackson, right? Is it also in chats? Like where do you have the sales conversation?
Yeah, it's been interesting. When we used to do the launch, it was very much in chat because we had the ability to have the conversation, present the solution, create the scarcity because I don't believe in fake scarcity. I think there's a lot of people out there that manufacture scarcity just so they try and get a commitment. And I personally think it's unethical. So our view is like, hey, in the launch model, there is scarcity because we have a certain number of seats and we have a specific start date. So it either works or it doesn't.
Yes.
When we shifted out of that, we tried to keep the sales strategy the same. And surprise, surprise, it didn't bloody work because the elements that make up that sales environment were not conducive to getting results. So what we then did, very similar to what you've mentioned, we use a phone-based sales approach, which is very much value-based. We make a game plan, make sure we're a good fit. Second, we use the sales page that explains what's actually included and what's not. What the likely outcomes are and the investment. And then we have a follow-up conversation to get started. And essentially, the urgency is created through those conversations to say, hey, firstly, is this a good fit for you or is it not? And secondly, is it the right time for you or is it not? And three, can you see the value associated with what we're offering or can you not? It's a very much common sense outcome where we're just facilitating them making the best possible decision for themselves, which seems to work well for us.
100%. Now, just to kind of tie into what you said there, right? Like with the game plan and whatnot, like from my experience, like there's different levels of urgency. And like everyone says urgency is what converts. And like you need to manufacture urgency, right? Like is what a lot of online folks tell you to do. Like in my experience, like there's no greater urgency than the internal sense of urgency of me wanting to solve my own problem, right? Like my iPhone breaks like today. Like, bro, I don't need no deadline to go and figure out the solution, right? Like, exactly. Like, that's an urgent problem, right? One of my great guys I love referencing and I learned a lot from is Perry Marshall. He calls it a bleeding neck, right? Like, what is the bleeding neck that your market has got? And how do you address that specifically, right? And what I think a lot of sales offers miss, what they don't have, especially with like launch-based selling, is it's kind of like you've architected this offer, which is kind of this like shotgun approach that covers a broad set of individual things, but everyone's looking at it going, well, this might be able to help me with what I see as my urgent problem, right? But if you had that individual sales conversation with people, like you can actually uncover what the bleeding neck is. Like, what is their urgent problem? And then how do you sell them on, like, look, like we have that piece right here. It's exactly what you need. And I find with my clients, with myself, if you do that, like you don't need deadlines, right? Like if you're identifying what their urgent issue is in that individual conversation, and it doesn't always have to be on the phone, right? But like identifying this is what you're looking for the solution for, we've got it, right? If you do that and you do it well, oftentimes you don't need to be giving a deadline. It's like, well, what are you waiting for, right? Like,
exactly.
When people ask, when are you getting the next group started? Like, what do you mean the next group? Like, we could get started with you like next week. And like that often is good enough.
It's really interesting. And I think the problem here is, mate, and from observing others in this space, where they get this wrong is when that environment of scarcity that's created through the launch model falls away. They try and substitute the missing value in that sales process through the bells and whistles. Like there's no free steak knives or free puppies that you can give away to bolster up the lack of that bleeding neck that you just mentioned. Like I think you put it perfectly. Yeah. And I think what this requires you to do is just to have deeper, more transformational conversations with your prospects to ensure that what it is that you're offering is an absolute no-brainer. And if it's not, you shouldn't move forwards. And they shouldn't either, because I think we need to realise that our prospects are generally smart people. Like they know what's good for them. Sure, they might do things in self-sabotage and we need to do our best to defend them from themselves. But if we can package it and facilitate that conversation, hopefully we get that penny drop moment and they go, yeah, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing that I think a lot of people need to do is get used to like leading their people, right? Like, one of the big things I steer a lot of my clients away, the big mistakes that people come to me to correct is like you kind of use that in language, right? Like we're always open, right? And like the general move and mentality is I'm going to build this evergreen funnel and then I'm going to tell people we're always open. You can join whenever you want. And then it's crickets. And the reason for it is like the belief is, well, if people can buy whenever they want, they'll come to buy from me when they're ready. But like in reality, like no one even knows you exist, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like the inbox is overloaded, that we all have our own priorities and like, you know, anxieties and things we're thinking about. Like we're not thinking about, oh, well, you know, I'll join Jackson's program there, you know, in 6 months time. Like that's just not how they're thinking. And like you have to get into practice it. If you're not using the launch model, you still have to like lead people into your business. So that's what real businesses do, right? They organize stuff and they invite people to it. You know what I mean? And at the event, at the whatever it is you're organizing, it could be a workshop, it could just be a conversational invite, right? It could be a download. Like if you're finding the moments to say, hey, I'm doing this thing. And if you could sustainably do things month after month, right, and then invite people to it, like it just offers an opportunity to be having so many more of those conversations that you would have mastered that you can then like direct into your thing. So, you know, there's this like, yeah, everyone go like there's kind of the two polar ends. They think like there's the launch model where you're selling once a year and there's evergreen funnels where you're not doing any promotions. And I'm like you can get away with not launching. Like you can't get away with not promoting your stuff. Like if you're moving away from the launch model, like you're going to have to go into like selling everyday mode. You just might need to change some of the systems and how you're thinking about your promotions month to month. But like this idea that you're not going to have to do like any campaigns and like you're just going to literally have automatic sales. Like that's one of the things I want to coach people away from. Because it's largely what people have kind of been propagandized into desiring by a lot of online marketers. And don't get me wrong, automation is awesome. Automation is sexy. Automation is an extremely useful tool, but it shouldn't be the end goal. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if you're trying to like automate your entire business, I just find like I've been in this industry, I don't know how many years. I can count on one hand how many times I've seen that. And I tell you, like nearly everyone who's built it has gotten immediately bored after they've built it.
I think the other part he made is that you're trying to automate an untested system. Like if it's dog shit to start with, just because you automate it doesn't change the fact that it's still going to be dog shit afterwards, right? And look, we've made this mistake as well because there are a lot of gurus out there that sell you the dream, and it's super compelling because it's sexy. It's romantic. The idea of having a completely automated and systemized business that allows you to do the 4-hour work week and sip rum out of a coconut in the Bahamas. The harsh reality is it's bullshit, because most of us haven't worked out our fundamentals yet to get to a point that we can actually automate the machine. And we had very similar issues. It's funny. This hurts. Like, you're reminding me of all of the mistakes that we've made, Russ. But like, the issue for us is that when we transitioned out of that launch model, how do you invite people to something that is always open? And the shift in mindset for us was these mini launches, right? Like, because you're always launching something new, or you're relaunching something. Like, it's like, hey, you only have events so many times a year, or you only have webinars so many times a year, or you only send out lead magnets so many times a year. And what was interesting that we worked out is the common thread of all of our audience, working with service-based business owners of all different shapes and sizes, coaches, consultants, advisors, agency owners, health, wellness, fitness, medical, trades. Like, they're all very different businesses, but the common thread between them all is that they are curious creators. They want to be actively involved in this stuff. They just don't know. So we create widgets, we create scorecards, we create calculators, we create Google Sheets. They go, oh, that looks interesting, and they get stuck into it. So by launching those things, that gives us an opportunity for these people to put their hand up and then invite them to have a deeper conversation. Like, hey, you've been interested in this thing. Why? Like, why now? And then advance the conversation. And it works well for us. So have you got any other ninja tricks when it comes to kind of marketing an always open kind of, for lack of a better term, an evergreen product?
Yeah, well, the biggest trick I've got for folks largely is moving away from this idea of a self-liquidating funnel to a self-funding funnel, right? And so, like, for a lot of people, when they're trying to get their business growing, right? Like, they're like, okay, well, we're going to do this self-liquidating funnel where the ads are going to pay for themselves. And we're going to sell this like $97 thing, and then it'll be a $200 thing, and then we'll upsell, right? Like, this is like what we're kind of taught to do. And like, it'll be self-liquidating. You'll be ready to rock on like day 0, and you'll be paying for your own ad spend. Awesome theory. I've seen it work a number of times. And like, you can make it work. I just find it's a lot of work. It's a lot of testing, and there's no guarantee that it will, like, performance will sustain. The strategy that I've personally built my entire business on, I get my other clients to focus on, is far simpler, which is just self-funding ads, which is take what you can afford to invest. Maybe it's $1,000, maybe it's $2,000, whatever it is. Go and buy some leads, like, create a good lead magnet, buy some leads, right? The intention is to sell one person. Let's say you get, like, I don't know, 1,000 leads at $3 a pop. So $3,000 is what you invested. Like, my intention with the clients I work with and whatnot is just to sell one out of those 1,000 people within the first 30 to 45 days and sell them something expensive. If you can do it in 30 days, great. If you can do it in like 45 days, like, I'm totally happy doing that as well. But at that point, you've now broken even, and you have the 1,000 leads, right? And like, if you look at the return numbers that particularly with my clients, right, who are, most people are not selling like $7 doohickeys, like, they're selling education, a philosophy, a way of doing things. Maybe it's coaching. Like, the decision time on a lot of those decisions is quite long. It's not. It can be weeks if you get snappy buyers, but like, for most people, it's going to be a month, maybe many months, right? And realistically, like, if you're looking for consistent sales, it's not about, all right, how am I converting more than new leads, right? It's how are we finding the people in our audience that are considering making a decision this month, right? Or next month. Now, the strategies I've used effectively, very similar to what you've said there, just direct invites, number one, right? Which are just like, hey, I'm doing this new thing. Would you like to join us? Right? Classic, like, Dean Jackson kind of conversational invite. Another one, Dean Jackson again, like the 9-word email, right? Mixing up the 9-word email and having it not just be, are you interested in A, B, and C, or are you still interested? But asking about jobs that the market is trying to do, right? So, for example, one of the clients I work with is a copywriting coach, right? He had a lead magnet that was nothing related to email marketing, but a lot of copywriters in his audience asking the question is like, hey, are you interested in improving your email copywriting? Right now, really simple question that's just asking, hey, like this, I know my audience is trying to do this thing. Are you interested in doing that? Not are you still interested in something you've signed up for, but like, what are the other like jobs you're helping your market like get done? And well, do you have some solution, obviously, to be able to sell them? In this situation, the client had a workshop he was doing inside his membership that was coming up this coming month on email marketing. And he was just asking ahead of that enrollment event is what we call it, right? There's something happening in the community. I'm basically selling what's happening in the community for like the 2 weeks ahead of it. Just asking, hey, like, are you interested in this thing? And being able to then look at, well, like what is resonance for my new customers? Like what appeals to them? And then organizing like, well, what are the events you're running inside in your business that you can invite them into, right? Oftentimes people want to, as you said, like, here's stuff that I'm creating for my market. Here's a workshop. I'm putting on a new like client-facing workshop where I've created this tool to like, advertise to like the prospects. Another way to think about it is, well, what are you already doing for your clients internally, like on a month-to-month basis? And can you organize people to say, hey, well, do you want to come in for this month? Because we're doing it like this month. Like, for example, this month we're doing like knowing your numbers, right? Like we're getting people like super clear on like how to track your funnel numbers and whatnot. We didn't specifically do it this month to invite folks in, but that would be a great one. Like I know there's people out there that have issues knowing and getting clear on their numbers, and they know they're making horrible decisions about it. It might not be super sexy, but it'd be worth the test, right? Just you turning your membership, your community inside out, and just saying, hey, would you like to come to the party that we're already organizing?
It makes so much sense, mate, because I see so many people, and we've done it ourselves, is that you try and create these multiple things. You're doing client stuff, you're doing stuff for prospects, you're doing stuff for like cold lead gen, and none of them are congruent or linked together. So it's just multiple silos of activity, and it just simplify. It makes so much sense when you talk about it like that. But I suspect there's not a lot of people outside of your world that are doing that, right? So I think that's super powerful.
I learned that from newsletter publishers, actually, right? Like, people will write a newsletter, and like the newsletter is going to the printer like this coming month, and what are they selling in the newsletter? Are in the emails about making a decision. It's like, well, here's what's in this month's newsletter. Like, would you like to come in and get this month's newsletter? Because we're going to ship it on Sunday. And like, oftentimes, if you're creating content for your community, people just don't take that same approach.
No, makes so much sense. Awesome, dude. This has been immensely valuable. So if anybody's listening to this, they really like what you've had to say, they've had a penny drop of ways that they could simplify the energy required and amplify the results. Who's an ideal client for you?
Yeah. So who's ideal for us? If you've got some sort of education program, some sort of coaching program, anything where like you have, maybe it's a membership site, you're taking your expertise, your wisdom, your hard-earned knowledge, and you're like teaching that to other people to help them get outcomes. We're very outcome driven here. So it's about learning for the sake of learning. If you're anyone who has like doing that and like you have already successfully launched your thing, so you've done like, I don't know, 25, 30K worth of sales, or you're doing an effective like, 10K a month, and you want to move away from the launch model, that's really who we're great at helping, right? Folks who kind of got the thing off the ground and they're looking to get up to like 30, 50K, that kind of sustainable, solid feeling business where you got that monthly recurring revenue. That's really who we're great at helping.
Beautiful. Love it. Fantastic. And if people want to get in touch, mate, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, best way to do it, go to www.openeverydaybook.com. Grab a copy of the book that we've got called Open Everyday, which is about breaking free of the launch model. Download that, jump on the email list. We'll probably start a conversation with you once you come in. And if you're interested in talking, absolutely fantastic. If you're interested in just gobbling up all the resources and sitting and stewing in our world for a while, that's totally cool too. But that's the best way to get a taste of what we're up to.
Beautiful. Awesome, guys. Make sure you opt in for that. We'll include links in the show notes. Ross, I appreciate you making the time, mate. This has been lots of fun. Looking forward to catching up again soon. And guys, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you take action, because a good idea in theory remains exactly that, just a good idea until you put it into practice. Make sure that you complete our 40-point financial performance scorecard to see how you're tracking towards financial freedom. And if you like this episode, make sure that you share it with your network so we can make sure that this goodness gets into the hands, ears and eyes of more people. Ross, thanks again, mate. Enjoy your Valentine's Day, and we'll catch you next time.
Appreciate it, brother. Yeah, thanks for having me, Jackson.